You are now listening to the Counterflow Podcast, a place for dissonant voices and unapproved opinions.
You get split in fucking half, but I call the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Here is your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back once again. This is the Counterflow Podcast. Great to have you with us here this week. You're going to love this guest. I know you are. And thanks to my friend Adam from Deborah Gets Red Pilled. He messaged me and he said, man, if you haven't heard Tony Arterburn yet, I really think you guys would get along well. There's a lot of similarities, a lot of overlap. And so I did my research. And found him on the Arterburn Radio Transmission show. They got weapons grade truth over there. The paratruther himself. And he's got a lot going on. He's got a lot. I'm not even going to list out his bio, but I'm just going to say he comes from a very similar background as I do. And if you lived through the 90s and were kind of a right-leaning person, maybe paleo-con type in the 90s, and you remember some of that, and then you kind of delve in through the conspiracy years with Alex Jones, and then all of that kind of stuff, Tony was right there with it. And so when I listen to the Arterburn Radio Transmission, it has the texture of it, the feel of his show reminds me of kind of that time period when I would listen to the radio back then and kind of right-leaning or conspiracy types. I really like it. And I love that kind of thing. And it's neat to hear him tell his story. He's going to tell his story straight out of the military. And back then, he went into Afghanistan and Iraq, and he understood very quickly early on that this is not what they're saying it is. And so we talk about the military-industrial complex. We get into all kinds of things. The purposeful, planned destruction of the United States is underway. We're going to get into all of that with my new friend, Tony Arterburn. Welcome to the show, sir. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad to get you on. I should thank a special shout out to my friend Adam from Deborah Gets Red Pilled for orienting me in the correct direction of yours. And so I've been consuming your content, and my only regret is that I didn't find you earlier on. This is a lot of what you talk about is right in my wheelhouse, and so I'm glad to have you on. You and I have a similar path. I think you grew up in Texas, correct?
Right.
As did I. And around in the mid-90s, I guess, I don't think I labeled it as this at the time, but I was what I would call a paleo-conservative. And I was a part of a secession group called, at the time, the Southern League, and just interested in states' rights. And I thought the South had a neat history of that, and thought the federal government was encroaching. And then when you live through Ruby Ridge and Oklahoma City, and I started reading about those kind of things. And then in 98, I moved to Austin, and I learned of Alex Jones. And so he was on the FM. At first, he was on public access here. Excuse me, I'm not in Austin anymore, but he was on public access there. And then there was an FM radio station with a lot of conspiracy type guys. My friend Jack Blood was a part of that, and Alex Jones. And so I kind of came of age listening to those voices with the paleo-conservative background. And then I guess in the 2000s, I was young, I'm a firefighter, and I had some time on my hands, some party time. And so I kind of got away from some of the more right-leaning things and was just kind of I guess I would call it a blue-pilled libertarian. And after the Trump years and the COVID years and stuff, I've kind of found my roots once again and shed off some of the blue-pilled libertarianism. So having said all of that, enough, my listeners probably know my story well enough. Kind of give your story, and I think we might see some overlap here.
Yeah, it's good to go back to your roots, back to the catacombs, as Pat Buchanan would say. Yeah, that's where my roots are in paleo-conservatism. But through the 90s, I talk about this on my show all the time, but I had my father, he was an entrepreneur from a young age. And I mean, when you say self-made, I believe in God, so I think God helps you and other people help you. You can't really truly be self-made, but my dad would come close to that. It's just somebody whose sheer will to become a businessman, to become an entrepreneur, to was on the board of a bank at 23. That's how many years he'd been putting in, and I think owned his own bank, chartered a bank by 29, had 30 or 40 convenience stores by that time, and so I guess what I grew up in. It was just. But you talk about hard work. I mean, that's where I learned work ethic, and like if you want something done, if it's in your mind and you want to make it a reality, I learned that's possible. Like an idea that you write down, you can manifest it but you got to put in the work. And one of the things I noticed about my dad, I was born in 79. So 1989, I'm 10 years old. He starts going Texas banking. And he doesn't even like for me to tell this story because it still makes him uncomfortable because it was such just a shock to the system. But Texas banking back up until the late 1980s was you could only have a bank in Texas if every bank had to have its own charter, its own president. That was in the Constitution, the state constitution of Texas. That way they kept out the national banks. And the federal government obviously works on behalf of multinational banking consortium. So they just started putting pressure on small banks using the FBI, FDIC, anything they could do after the savings and loans crisis to open up Texas to national banks. And so that was my first introduction into seeing how the government squeezes honest business people who are just following the rules to try to make way. I think they were doing it en masse. They were just really putting on pressure on state and local banks to try to make it an inroad for nationals to come in and say, well, they can't handle it. Their books are bad or something. So that's why now in Texas, you've got a national bank on every corner, but that wasn't like that. And of course, Ruby Ridge, and then of course, Waco. And my father said, no, we need to, I was 14 in 94. So he's like, we need to start finding out what's really going on. I don't understand my country anymore. I don't know what they're doing. They're trampling our rights. So I would go and hear people like Lieutenant Colonel Bo Gritz speak. Mm-hmm. Bo Gritz had a radio show. He was the most highly decorated Green Beret in Vietnam. Supposedly they based the movie Rambo, at least the second one, off of Bo Gritz. And I got to meet him. But that was before Oklahoma City, that was the era of the militias, the Patriot movement, and they had the Patriot Radio Wars, with Bill Cooper on WWCR and G. Gordon Liddy and was it Tom Valentine, all these people. And I mean, of course, Oklahoma City changed that. It dispersed that movement as it was intended to do. So I kind of I learned so much in that period of time between age 14 to 16. And then, I've concentrated on high school powerlifting. I was a state champion and national champion powerlifter. I was telling David Knight that this morning on his show. He didn't know that, but I was like, yeah, that was one of the reasons I was having to be in Afghanistan, because I told the whole story about I was in Sofia, Bulgaria for the World Championships in 2001. And had I not been there, my unit that I was with went to the Pentagon immediately, and he'd had somebody on. But it's getting back to, that era changed me, and I decided to join the military. I joined the military in 99. I was 19. And went through basic training, airborne school, became a paratrooper, went to Fort Bragg. And as I was telling David Knight this morning, is an interesting ride through history. I volunteered for my first deployment, first day on the job. I volunteered to go to Kosovo, Mr. Clinton's war. I didn't know anything about it. But I've got, real world lessons on what NATO is and what a police action is all that stuff. And worked that. And of course, 9/11 happened, and as fate would have it, I was representing the U.S. on the American powerlifting team. And that's when my unit, after 9/11, they just went directly to the Pentagon. I would have learned a lot had I went directly to the Pentagon, by the way, because we were talking on the David Knight show. He was talking yesterday, somebody had been there, and they were, where are the plane parts, what did he actually see? Where's the engines, all this stuff? And that's always an open question. But I went directly to Afghanistan. We were the first Army company on the ground in Kandahar, Afghanistan. Officially, I was debriefed by General Mattis, Mad Dog Mattis, if you remember, the Secretary of Defense. Real big globalist guy, but he talks tough. He's a big globalist. Back then, it was like, oh, that's General Mattis. And anyway, Marines and Spec Ops were there, and then we got there. So got to see on the ground in real time what was happening with the quote unquote war on terror, and then did the invasion of Iraq, and that just kind of set the table for my life. I had those early formative years listening to people speak about how the government was overreaching, taking away your rights, and then kind of juxtaposed to me serving the same entity and serving the military. I had somebody write me the other day on my Wise Wolf Gold and Silver site, and they said, it's a real turnoff that you mentioned you're veteran owned. And somebody like me, like you're just a shill for the military industrial complex, and something I forget the exact wordage, but it was funny because I'm like, have you ever listened to me? You don't know anything about me. You don't know that I obviously criticize that, and you can be both things. And it's funny. It's just one of those, and a lot of people will comment often when they don't actually read what you wrote or listen to what you said. But it was real formative, and I'm real thankful for those times. Like I wouldn't be doing what I do now. I wouldn't be on your show. I wouldn't be doing podcasting or radio without that backdrop of knowledge. When I was in Iraq, I think I read like 200 books. I'm not kidding. I mean, like I read biography, history. There wasn't anything you were going to, the mission in Iraq really was don't die. Like, don't die here. That was what I told myself. Like, just anything you can do to not get blown up here, because I was angry about having to go to Iraq. Anybody who knows me at that time, that's like, this is a blunder of all blunder. What are we doing? And I couldn't figure it out. I was trying to put logic on top of it. But we got through it, and I made the best of it. And so it's been an interesting journey. I ran for Congress in 2013, 2014. And that was an experience. That's the first time I learned, because I'd been in the papers before. I'd been in media covered me before for my powerlifting. So I never had the experience of being covered by a media that hates you for what you believe. I'd never seen that before. I got totally taken to the woodshed by the Dallas Morning News, and they fooled me real good. I was like talking to this young lady, and she's telling me, which got me to open up about my life, and just like we're doing here. And then it just painted me as a crazy person. Over the top, like just taking stuff out of context or just making stuff up whole cloth. I mean, they do that. So I took a layoff for about 5 years after that. And about 2018, I just decided to jump back in both feet. I started the Arterburn Radio Transmission because everybody has a show, right? Everybody has a report or something. So I thought, why don't I do something? I'll name it something different. And then the acronym is, it's ART. So like my last name, Arterburn, and the Arterburn Radio Transmission was born. And now we have Paratruther, and that's the same show, but I went and got because I was a paratrooper in the Army. Now I'm a Paratruther. I do the Wise Wolf Gold and Crypto show and America Unplugged with the great Don Jeffries and Billy Ray Valentine on Saturday. So I'm trying to give you like the shortened version so I don't get off on a tangent, but that's a short bio.
Regarding your military experience, you said early on that you kind of thought this was a massive blunder that you're involved in at the time. Was there some type of sentiment amongst your peers there that, well, 9/11 happened, we're here for revenge? Or was it immediately after Afghanistan, like, wait a second, this isn't what we were told? How did that kind of come about, that sentiment?
Well, I'll never forget, I realized we were going into Iraq when I was actually in Afghanistan. And that was when they had some people come to the gate, and the military intelligence was working with some of the former Taliban members and people of the warlords and people. And they were saying, oh, we just talked to Mullah Omar and he's in Baghdad. Like Mullah Omar was the head of the Taliban. I don't think they ever found him. He had one eye. And supposedly he was in cahoots with Saddam Hussein. And I was thinking, this is such bullshit. It's not real. But they kept talking about Iraq. Oh, these calls are coming from Iraq. We're talking to our contacts in Iraq. I'm like, no, this is, and they were laying the groundwork. And of course, I was still somewhat like, I was talking about this the other day. When I was 22, 23, watching Saddam had put these Chinese worm missiles that he wasn't supposed to have under the UN agreement. And he was cutting them in half on like live television, like saying, we're dismantling the rockets so everybody could see. And I thought, well, this may stop the war. Like he's doing it in Hans Blix, it was supposedly, they're like, we can't find any weapons. People were driving around to all the Iraqi facilities. But our propaganda machine, the mainstream media, they wanted a war. They were giddy. They loved Fox News, CNN. They all love war. They love it. And to see all the bombs and the explosions. And, it's still, 9/11 was still fresh. They were able to spin that story. Like, look what Saddam did. He's got a death ray. He's got he's got the weapons of mass destruction. And I just thought, this is going to be the blunder of all blunders. Had a really strong reaction to it. Very angry. Tony was a very angry 22, 23-year-old. And I just got married. I'm one of the soldiers she was part of my unit when I was in Afghanistan. And that's my mother and my son now. And it was just a crazy time. I mean, it's left an impression on me. Just like you never really leave that time. And so it formed who I am today. So now, like, everything to me, I never really feel like I left war. Like, it's just my life is one. Mm-hmm. I don't like it, but it is what it is. I mean, I'm real sensitive to, like, if I see headlines of what that leads to, like, I can just kind of feel it. Like I call it a side effect. Like what we're doing now with Russia and Ukraine. Mm-hmm. Like, we're doing this. Like, we don't want peace. Like, literally, we don't want it. Like, we're just anything we can do not to have it. And that to me is the psychopathic behavior of the highest order. Just no regard for human life, because we're just trying to start a war. Same thing with Taiwan and all the rest of that. But it's shaped who I am. And as far as the blunder is concerned, I remember you're trying to go back to your original question. Did people know it? Nobody liked Iraq. Like, we thought Afghanistan, there's Al Qaeda and all this stuff. That's what you're told, right? But that's not what it was. And I even talked today. I was talking to David Knight, and I said, "Look, there's people that were there on the ground. And then you talk about the first wave. They thought that they were trying to find Al Qaeda and Osama bin Laden too. And these are like upper echelon people." But if we know now, like, I got books on my shelf of 9/11 research, it's clear evidence that they had meetings with Osama bin Laden in Dubai in July of 2001 from the head, the station chief in Dubai, went and met with bin Laden. They made him. Like, he's a construct of the intelligence agency. But see, the compartmentalization, that's how you can have a conspiracy, is because you have even high people in the FBI, CIA, people that were there. I watched them, and they were looking for Osama bin Laden. That was the first question you asked a prisoner. When was the last time you saw Osama bin Laden? I'll never forget that time. And to know what I know now, it just seems so just bizarre, to put it mildly. But I don't know anybody who liked Iraq. I mean, yeah, soldiers are gold. I mean, the soldier lifestyle, especially if you're going to make it a career, you just go. You get more time, more money on deployment. Guys will just like, let's just go. That's what I do. I'm not into the politics. Me, I want to know why. I'm more of I'm asked. That's why didn't make a career out of the military, because I'm not a good. At a certain level, I'm going to stop taking orders. I start rebelling, and now I don't think I would even fit in anymore.
If some young man came to you, maybe 15, 16, 17, and said, well, you were in the military, I'm thinking about doing it now, what would your advice be?
Don't go.
Okay.
Don't go. You want to be a warrior? You want to stand up for the Constitution? Join your sheriff's department. You want to learn war? You want to do warrior skill stuff? Do it here. The fight's here. It's not out there. There is no out there threat to the U.S. We cause the threats, and it's made internally by the people that run this place. You want to serve your nation? Start a family. Be a good man. Work on yourself. There's warrior skills and things you can do. Like, if you want to prove yourself, because that's part of I read a book once about the warrior ethos, and I'll never forget one of the quotes about think it was Stephen Pressfield or Pressman that wrote that book. He talked about how like the young Afghan boy gets an AK-47, the paratrooper gets his wings, like the Marine, goes through the crucible. You earn the title. So it's like you go through rites of passage as a young man. So I understand like the call. Like my son is 17, wants to be a Marine. I beg you, please don't do this. He's probably going to do it because he doesn't listen to the old man. But I love him. I'm real proud of him. I just don't want him to do that because I know what this is now. And it's not even the same country. You're not even talking to the same. I hate saying that. It gives me, it really does make me sad to even say that. But I don't think it's the same country. It's not the same government. And I look at what they're doing in Ukraine and I go, if you guys knew the history of this, you wouldn't change your profile picture on Facebook to Ukrainian flag. You just wouldn't if you really knew what is happening and what the goal is here.
Do you think, and I'm an outsider here, so I could be speaking from ignorance. That's why I want to ask you. When I see, let's say, the current administration feature certain military generals and leaders on TV and when I watch it on the news, to me, it seems that the military, at least at the top, has been weakened dramatically as far as IQ levels, ideology. And I suspect that you see these commercials, even for the CIA. I'm bi and trans, and I'm a female, and all these things, and I'm in the CIA. And so when I see things like that, there's almost a feeling like that the foundations of what was formerly our powerful empire seem to be weakening. Do you see that at all?
Yeah, I think it's by design. I don't think. See, if you read history, you'll realize that there's a natural cycle for an empire. Like I'm listening to. I have Will Durant's The Story of Civilization just over my shoulder, but I bought all the audio books and I've been listening recently to the volume called Caesar and Christ, and it was written in like the 40s. And it's just talking about the Roman Empire leading up to Christianity. And the natural cycle is, once you're overextended, and then you have a native population that has a declining birth rate, you debase your currency, all this stuff. You start to have the decline, and you'll see that. And that's inevitable for most anything. The British had a decline kind of similar to that. I mean, it was the empire which the sun never set. They started too many wars, and then they basically absorbed the United States in some way, in my opinion. But I don't think that the U.S. is naturally declining. I think that it's the first nation in history that would be brought down artificially by accelerating these timelines. I think they know exactly how to do it. Because you couldn't if you're looking at us back in the 70s and 80s, you can't. It's Red Dawn. You try to take over the United States militarily, you will fail. So how do you get rid of this? How do you get rid of this superpower? Well, you do exactly what's just been done to us. You open up the floodgates of immigration. And not that there's anything wrong with people wanting to come here, but you're talking about unchecked, unfettered immigration, the likes of which we've never seen. If you tell people actually how many people immigrate here, it dwarfs anything we've ever done in our history by a factor of 1,000. It's a massive amount of people. And of course, the majority of those vote one party. It's 80% vote for one party. It's the Democratic Party. The Republicans know that because they're told to do it. It's open the floodgates. You would have the breakdown of your ability to save money and have the American dream. What happened to the American dream? I thought we were supposed to have one. You could have one person in a household working. You could own a home. You can't do that when they devalue your currency constantly. Richard Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard in 1971. It was $35 an ounce. And gold was $600 an ounce in 1979. Now, is that because gold went up in value? No. It's because the dollar went down in value. But they don't teach you that in school, the disparity between the... So it leaves people constantly having to chase green pieces of paper. That's why you have all these new products. Like in 1971, there wasn't such a thing as an IRA or a 401k, and they didn't run around the clock investment commercials. You have to do investments now. You have to do something, or you can't save. But our ancestors were able just to say, okay, I had a silver dollar. I'm going to put it in a coffee can. I'll bury it. I'll dig it up. And it's still a dollar in 10 years. And that's not what happens now. So America's been targeted for destruction artificially. I always give you the long way around. Depends on how my mind's functioning on that particular day. So sorry about that. It's a long explanation. But I think that if you look at, and I'm actually kind of supporting a lot of this now to be, I don't know, like an accelerationist of some kind. But like if they hire all the woke people or the first people, like it's like the first, trans, that identifies as a pancake from the planet peanut butter or whatever. Like this is I want that because I put that person in charge of that thing, because that means that they can't do anything up there. Like it's just, but the military is another aspect. Let me give you an example. Like if you're looking at somebody who has made it up to a 4-star general, like a General Petraeus, that's a politician. There are no more patents. By the way, there's like so many more 4-star and 3-star than we've ever had in our history. Like it's just a ton of generals, and it's just so top heavy, and they have the open revolving door to the defense contracts. So I don't think it's going to get better. And we're picking fights with this woke military. Did you see that video that the PSYOP, it was the special PSYOP, psychological warfare division out of Fort Bragg made? It's like a 3-minute video, and it has like that weird little cartoon ghost guy going through.
I haven't seen this, but just
to watch it.
To your point really quick, I do follow them, oddly enough, on Instagram. And just for people listening, that division exists in your military. So think about that for a second. The psychological warfare, PSYOPs division in the U.S. military is a real thing, and they don't hide it. But please go ahead.
Well, you'll have to watch the video. Billy Ray Valentine and myself, we talked about this when I hosted David Knight's show. It was some months back, but it really, I mean, they talk about we control it. We control the narrative. We're in your mind, like it's just, and they are. I mean, they are. But that's Psy war everywhere. I think recently too, and I'll have to find the article, but the White House was asking like other agencies to tell them what psyops they're running because there's so many psyops going on. They want to figure out what's real and who's doing what. I don't know. I think they've turned on some switch and may not be able to get the genie back in the bottle.
Do you foresee a time? And I don't know if I should cloak this in certain language, but whatever. Do you foresee a time where the U.S. military is turned inward on the civilian population at all?
I really hope not.
Yeah,
but it's possible. I mean, it's been turned in before. I mean, you talked about the Civil War at the beginning of the show,
right?
Did the South want to own Pennsylvania? No. They just want to be left alone. Like, we're going to have our own country. We believe this is a constitutionally guaranteed thing that we can secede. I mean, you can make that argument. But a lot of people, if they don't know their history, don't realize the South didn't want to win anything other than leave us alone. And
right.
You can't be left alone. I mean, you're talking about the Texas secession movement as well, like Texas right now.
Right.
Continuity of government. See, that's why politics are a sideshow, and especially conservative politics, unfortunately. Because the Republican Party, in my opinion, is designed to fail. It's designed to make sure that the left wins, that the globalists win. It's designed to capitulate. They don't like being in power. Have you ever noticed that? Like it's like if you told your doctor, "Hey, I've found this article that I can take mega doses of vitamin C and I can beat my whatever. It helped me with my arthritis or whatever." They're like, yeah, but if you don't take all these pills, then how do I pay my bills? Like that's the thing. It's like the Republicans are constantly needing you to be in a state of like outrage, but not actually do anything about it. And that's why like I'm almost 43 years old. And since I was 8 years old, I've heard people running on a secure border. It ain't happening. They're not going to do it. It's not profitable. Then what would they run on? Then they have to run on things that'll help you. It's a scam. I don't get involved in politics anymore. I'm sad about that because I do think there's a lot of good people that want to make a difference. I don't know what to tell them other than go local, work on yourself. The same thing I would give a person you asked me about the military. Work on yourself. Work on the local.
I got to tell you guys about a few new products over at our favorite CBD store. That's, of course, PalomaVerdeCBD.com. The first thing I'm going to tell you about that's brand new over there is these THCV gummies. There's 10 milligrams of THCV per gummy and 10 gummies per jar. A lot of y'all are probably familiar with this THCV. Some people call it diet weed. It's very good for intermittent fasters. THCV helps suppress or dull your appetite, which, of course, a little bit unlike regular THC that, as you probably know, or at least you've heard, can give you the munchies. THCV helps promote energy, unlike regular THC, which, of course, makes you feel kind of mellow. This is legal, oh my God, legal under the Farm Bill. So thank you, Farm Bill. The second thing I want to tell you about that's new over at PalomaVerdeCBD.com is their full spectrum nano CBD soft gels. These have the perfect amount of CBD with THC. 25 milligrams of CBD and 0.27 milligrams of THC per soft gel. Their everyday formula brings your body back to homeostasis and adds this nice extra layer of chill. I like that. I think you do too. A lot of us need that now and again, or maybe every day. Nanotechnology allows better absorption into your body, even better than their other products, which was already amazing. Again, this has a calming effect and it lasts about 6 to 8 hours. And of course, like the other stuff, it's legal under what? The Farm Bill. Thank you, Farm Bill. It's legal. I would not get you guys in trouble. Go over to PalomaVerdeCBD.com. They've got a lot of great products. I talk about them all the time. The massage oil. They've got the sleep bundle. They got nano CBD soft gels, CBD bath bombs, which are amazing. Gummies, tinctures, all of that stuff. Of course, for my French bulldogs, Lux and George, the pet tinctures and the pet gummies. All of these things are over at PalomaVerdeCBD.com. Oh yeah, did I tell you about the cool menthol sports cream? Of course I have before. It's the best sports cream in the world. I get reviews from customers on this all the time. That's the number one thing I like from this company. And they've got all of these great things. Over at PalomaVerdeCBD.com, you will get a promo code because Carlos and Vanessa, the owners, love this show and they want to help out the listeners of this show. Promo code BUCK at checkout gets you 20% off of your order over at PalomaVerdeCBD.com. Promo code BUCK at checkout gets you 20% off of your order. Go give them business and in turn, give me business. Now, let's get back to the show. Do you think change you just hitting on that right there, can be made locally? Is there still hope? Like you mentioned, sheriff, I've breaking out of the libertarian world where all cops are bad, according to a lot of libertarians. But I've been saying, if you can get a good person as your local sheriff in a small town, that makes a world of difference, especially when you look at 2020 and 2021 and how that went down. Even in blue California, there were red pockets where the sheriff would refuse to enforce certain dictates from Gavin Newsom. Do you think it is still possible to kind of have a freedom, a liberty-oriented small area, as long as the right people are elected in that capacity?
Yeah, absolutely. You talk about there's constitutional Sheriff Mack.
Yeah.
When I filled in on InfoWars, I interviewed him, and smart guy. There's a lot of good people. The majority of America still is great people, loves the country. We just don't have access to power. That's what I'm talking about. Like the game is rigged on the national level and on the state level, even really a lot. But on the local level, like you can still make a difference. And that's where you can create like sanctuary counties for the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. Like you could just say, I'm a sanctuary for the Constitution. Like you can have your weapons, you can have freedom of speech, and I'm the sheriff, and if you're a alphabet agency who's part of the woke globalist mob, and that's what made QAnon so funny to me. Because I'd go, what do you mean white hats? What are you talking about? And they're like, well, the white hats inside. I'm like, there is no white hats. What are you referring to? Every agency of government is completely captured by globalists. I'm sorry. It just is. I mean, do you think that there's like people. What are they? I mean, when Trump was president, they like, well, he's a dictator, and like, who's following? Even if he wanted to be, no one would carry out those orders. I mean, no one's going to do any unless you're part of the ruling class, which is the ruling class is leftist and socialist and globalist, and the reason that is because that's what serves the world's richest people the most. Reality is not what. I wish we could do. I'd like to just do more shows on this where I'm trying to explain at least what I've understood by doing all the programs that I've done and all the research is that it's not what we grew up believing it was, like who's actually opposing who.
In your experience, I know you're on, I think it's a Worldwide Christian Radio Network, and you do some obviously not just national, but worldwide broadcasting. Does it seem like more, let's say, boomer conservatives are starting to understand that things aren't exactly as they grew up thinking, right?
Slowly.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where like Newsmax and Fox, they just really capture that, the boomer generation, for lack of a better thing. But there's a demographic there, right, that they just got. And if you're like somewhat right-leaning, then you're going to get Sean Hannity, and then you're going to think like, well, I come from a talk radio background, and I remember like I used to follow Mark Levin.
Yeah.
And he would go off the air live, and then my station would pick up and I'd go live. And I would think, man, if some of his callers stayed over for the next show, they're just going to be like, what is going on? Because his callers would call in and say, I always got to get over there to Iran. We got to show them America and freedom and all this stuff. And I'm like, we got to bomb those people. And then it hit my show. And I'm talking about the military-industrial complex and enriching the defense contractors and why it's a sham and, that's none of our business. And so it's a total contrast. And you just, like the talk radio caller, boomer extraordinaire, like where do those people go now? I mean, they can't, are they supporting did they change their profile picture to Ukrainian flag? I assume so. You get like people like Sebastian Gorka. He's so pro-Ukraine. It's just, I don't know. Where do we go anymore to find, you're a paleocon, right? Well, you're like me, which is like, I just believe in tradition and I'm anti-war. I'm anti-giant state. I just think local, Thomas Jefferson was right. You're not going to be able to have a republic in a mass nation. Like that just doesn't work. Unfortunately, because it's too much top-down power.
The paleocons, and speaking of Pat Buchanan, he was someone I grew up appreciating. There was kind of they started to rise in popularity around when he was running for president. I think it was maybe 92, if I remember correctly. But 9/11 hit, and that's been all wiped out. Of course, it was at the time. Do you see any similarities to some of the 90s politics with the government coming after right-wing extremists and the paleo-conservative movement kind of blossoming it for a few years there and to where we're at right now?
So phrase that again for me. So
do you see any parallels between the 90s, some of the 90s politics and where we are right now? And the backdrop, I guess, would be seemingly after Trump got elected, there seemed to be a rightward push amongst some Republicans, the rank and file, not elected members by any means, but to where there was more of a populist kind of Buchananite feel that I hadn't been used to on the right for so long, with neocons running everything. And now with Biden, with this red backdrop, when he gives this speech and that's saying that white nationalism and Christian nationalists are the biggest threat, to me, it feels like there is a parallel a little bit to that 90s political scene that I kind of remember growing up on.
Well, sure. So what they have to make sure, like Trump, and you can look at things like Cambridge Analytica. Billy Ray Valentine has done great research there on the Infinite Fringe about this, where you had Cambridge Analytica and Steve Bannon, and they had 5,000 data points on any American that had social media. And so they realized, they came up with phrases like build that wall, lock her up. Like that was coming from Cambridge Analytica. What Cambridge found, and my opinion was, is they found what I already knew, which was if you ran a populist campaign, and Trump wasn't good at it because he didn't have the I don't know. He wasn't able to articulate, right? It's just not his forte. He's more of a bombastic personality. But like if it had been a Buchanan, but obviously it might have been totally rigged. But I think the people, in order to win, you need a populist campaign. You need to go after the ruling class. You got to go after these transnational movements of free trade, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, NAFTA. You got to go after open borders. You got to bring the troops home. Making a strong economy, a dollar as good as gold. That wins. People want that for the most part. Now, we talked about the talk radio caller. They'll just follow whoever's the nominee. But I'm talking about just instinctive, like reaching across and getting the independents. Mm-hmm. And the Blue Dog Democrats, right? The Reagan Democrats. There are some of those people still left. 2016, I think, was pretty exceptional for that because they ran on anti-establishment. But I think that's the forbidden thing. You're not supposed to do that. It wins. Trump didn't do that in his second campaign. He ran on, I don't know what did he run on? Like it was like, the military and like strong military. And I think it was just a couple of throws. But he wasn't running on, can't run on record because it was tanked at that time. So he didn't run on populism. He didn't run on any of that stuff. It was a winner. And maybe that's why they didn't run it. Maybe he didn't want to win. So I don't know. I mean, I think that they want to make sure that anything that's populism, nationalism, real pushback to globalism, demonize it. It's white supremacy. It's racist. It has its overtones of the Nazis or something, mm-hmm. even though it has nothing to do with anything. But that, to me, the winner has always been populism. And that's why they don't bring it up. That's why nobody runs. Trump did it one time and it won. Mm-hmm. And then people just so want to, but people are still hanging on to 2016. And it's really sad. I hate seeing it, but they are still hanging on. There's still the MAGA stuff. And I don't know, I left it behind. I'm like, I can't continue to put faith in this thing. But I think I've just learned so much from it. I look at the local level as the answer. Mm-hmm. Start there.
Where do you think things are going with this war, possible World War III, I suppose, or the NATO encroachments? Where do you see this Russia, Ukraine, now the pipeline thing? Where is this going in your mind?
I'm really concerned about it because our side, or whatever that is, the people, our ruling class and NATO. Something that Martin Armstrong in his Socrates program they put out about 6 months ago, he said, the program keeps running that the West is going to use war to save their currency. So the dollar, basically, the petrodollar and fiat currency of the West and our markets, because they're so over. They just printed and created so much currency in the last, 80% of the dollars ever made were made in the last 36 months. So they're just creating currency like crazy. And a war would bail them out, or at least temporarily would, put the blame on somebody else. So I think the provocations to get Vladimir Putin to invade Ukraine were just so over the top. We got biolabs, we got military, and we're running weapons to Ukraine. We're using it as a giant money laundering system. We've been threatening to bring it into NATO for years, but I asked people, if China came along and said, hey, we just signed a trade and defense pact with Mexico, and we're going to park some biolabs here.
Right.
We're going to park some weapons here, maybe some short-range nuclear missiles. None of your business, America, but we're going to be right here. And if you attack, if you have any border dispute with Mexico, now you got to deal with the Red Chinese. I don't know, we'd probably stand for it now, but a sane country would not stand for that. And that's what we're doing in Ukraine. So a lot of people think, Ukraine's just this victim. No, it may be, the Ukrainian people are, but their government, along with our government, is working to make this war happen. And you look at Zelensky, he doesn't want to end the war. When has he ever talked about going to the table for peace? Nothing. So that, got warmongering there and national survival for Russia. And we're not stopping it. Now you got the Nord Stream pipelines blown up. Do you think Russia did that? I was joking. It was like a Russian passport found in the
in the rubble,
in the water.
Right.
But the Russians, that was a clear message, though. We're not going back. We're not going to have peace. You're not going to, take your pipeline. And it's just to have, the people of Europe, you look at like the Italian prime minister they just had, he's like, do you want air conditioning or do you want democracy? That's what they asked him. Like, you got to turn your air conditioner off. We got to save power. Do you want that? Because we're fighting for democracy in Ukraine, a word that I just loathe.
Yeah.
The word democracy makes me, it's like, I think the worst word ever. It's awful. To me, that means tyranny. It means murder. It means corruption. I don't like that word. Just to be clear. And the older I get, the less I like it. But whenever I hear somebody say we're going to fight for democracy, I know that the game is rigged. And I'm very concerned. We've been expanding NATO since we promised Gorbachev we wouldn't.
Yep.
If he'd bring his troops home, we would too. And we just said, nah, never mind. We'll just expand. It has consequences. Same thing going with, I think they want a two-front war. I think they want World War III. I think they want to, have, because it's good for their population control. And think about guys like me. If you're in World War III and you got a guy on the shortwave radio talking about the mistakes and the lies from the government, how long do I have left? Not long, but I won't stop doing it. I'm just going to do it till the end. That's just what that's why I'm here. I just find it just so infuriating that other people can't see this. Like, they're literally cooking up a war so they can silence opposition, so they can have one ruling mono party and put us into a great reset, one world government. It's just plain as day to me. And I hope that I'm wrong.
Yeah, me too. I say that a lot on this show. These things we're discussing, the negative aspects of them, I hope we're so wrong. I hope that the depopulation agenda fails, but signs don't point that way, at least right now. Do you... One thing I know you're good at is the financial dealings, and you deal in silver and gold. And you already mentioned this is such a crazy stat, but I hope no one skipped over, as you said, that 80% of the dollars ever created in the United States have been created in the last 3 years. 80%. And I've seen progressives I'm acquaintances with online trying to explain that inflation is not a real thing. Can you talk about, is there where do you see the economy headed? Because a lot of people, even those of us who've been predicting that hyperinflation would happen and that even after the 2008 crash, they might prop it back up, but by now it would have failed. I thought initially in 2016 had Hillary won, that could have been a good thing because it would have collapsed under her and everyone would have said, well, Democrats can't rule. So, but it keeps churning. It does keep churning, this house of cards, it seems like. Where do you see this economic situation going with the dollar, everything? And then I know you're good at explaining CBDC, and so we can get into that as well too.
It's a zombie. It won't die. It's the living dead, our fiat currency system. A lot of people don't understand. Like, we didn't have inflation in this country. That's a foreign thing. Because through the 19th century, we had a gold standard. That's the founding of our country. We had a bimetallic standard, but it was the same. 1801, the dollar was the same as 1901. There was no difference. There was no inflation. Matter of fact, there was deflation, and that's where you get like the allegory in The Wizard of Oz. The yellow brick road and the Emerald City is the greenback. And in the book by L. Frank Baum, it's Dorothy clicks her silver slippers, right? It's just, and the Cowardly Lion is William Jennings Bryan and all this stuff. We were talking about trying to introduce inflation so to give people relief back in the 19th century. That's where you get the populist uprising and William Jennings Bryan and free silver, trying to release that, trying to ease up the dollar a bit. So Snopes will fact check you and say, that's not right. 80% of the dollars weren't printed. Keyword is printed. There's not enough paper. First of all, you can't print $1 trillion. There's not enough paper on planet Earth. If you take 1 trillion $1 bills, if you were actually able to do it and you printed them and you stretched them end to end, they would reach the sun. That's just 1 trillion. They go 93 million miles. I've said this many times. To me, it's still shocking. Like the sheer number. give you an example. The year 2000, the debt of the U.S. was $5 trillion. So it took us from 1776 to the year 2000 to hit $5 trillion. Okay. The year 2010, it was $10 trillion. It doubled. The year 2020, it was $20 trillion. And guess what it is now? It's $30 trillion. And we're just a couple of years on. Do you see the acceleration of debt and currency creation? It's, when I talk about a plan, you'd have to be, it's an inside job to like redistribute the wealth. That's why, in my opinion, like you had the giant wealth transfers that started after we went off the gold standard. The first giant wealth transfer was in 1974 when Nixon was driven from office. That was the last year we ran a trade surplus. And we never ran a trade deficit ever. So starting that period of time, we started importing more than we exported. And all the manufacturing, we made it economically non-viable for people to build things here. Then you introduce things like the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, GATT, and NAFTA. And you know, Ross Perot called it a giant sucking sound. That's what's going to happen to this country. So yeah, siphon off, that's the first big wealth transfer. But the second biggest wealth transfer was just what just happened, which was COVID, 1984, and Trump's lockdown and Fauci running the country and all that. That's where you take the middle class and you transfer it to billionaires and trillionaires. And it's sad, but that's what they've done. People ask me all the time, because I'm in the gold and silver business, what's happening? Why is gold, so low and all this stuff? And I'm like, well, it's manipulated. I mean, they don't want the dollar to be in any competition with gold. That's one. Same thing with silver. And where's it going to go? I don't know. It's kind of like, you ever heard the term TINA? It's like, there is no alternative. The reason that the dollar is still functioning because the Ponzi scheme is using it to transfer the notes, and it's more stable for things like petroleum and energy around the world. But those days are numbered. And like I say, it's a zombie. But the reason why we've always been able to come out of this, why we're not the Weimar Republic with the wheelbarrows full of cash, in my opinion, is because we have multiple countries around the world that have to take it. And then this is starting to, the cracks in the system are where Russia in the last 6 months says, we're not going to take US dollars anymore. They're candy wrappers to us. We don't want Chinese yuan. We want gold. I think they're even discussing Bitcoin. So, backing the ruble with gold. So I'm seeing that happen in the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. That makes up 40% of the earth. They want away from the dollar. They want their own gold-backed payment systems and digital currencies for trade. They know that we've rigged it. We know that we rigged the London bullion markets and all that. So I would just say that I don't know what's going to happen to the dollar. I just think that there is no fiat currency in history that lasted. It always goes to zero. It's not backed by anything. We will, and it's funny because we don't know why are we using the government for currency?
Right.
It's bizarre when you really think about it. Like, what do they have to do with currency? I mean, privately, we can do cryptocurrencies. And we have a worldwide gold standard. Like, that's just published for the world to see. Like, every country uses the same spot price. Everybody agrees what gold's worth. Everybody agrees what Bitcoin's worth. Why do I need you? And that's a great question. The answer is you don't. I mean, in the modern era, it's antiquated at best. But we were founded in this country that only Congress could coin money, and it had to be gold and silver. And the reason that is because if you have a system where they can print as much as they want or create as much as they want, then you'll never get to the bottom of corruption. You'll never have investigations. You'll always just be able to cover up anything. That's why Donald Rumsfeld couldn't track $2.3 trillion on September 10th, 2001. And it's just going to be, we'll find it. It's in this accounting office, it's Pentagon. You see where I'm going with this? It's like we can't fix any problems in this country until we fix the currency. As long as the government has a monopoly, by the way, and the Federal Reserve is not federal. It's a private banking consortium. It's a cartel. And they have nothing to do, they're not regulated. They're not audited. They don't have oversight. You can't put a FOIA into the Fed. And it's so brilliant. Language is so important. the banksters that set that up, the creature from Jekyll Island, the conspiracy to set this thing up, they came up with that language. Don't call it a bank. Call it a reserve, even though there's no reserves there. And we need to be federal. It's so brilliant how they did it. It's federal. It's not federal. It's not an actual agency. But I do think that the main thing about all this is I don't think the dollar's going to zero. I think it's going to go to digital. I think they'll use a crisis to implement it. I also believe that they'll use a Republican to do that. So Republicans, if you're really looking for a new president, I think you'll get one soon. And it'll be the person who ushers, because it'll make the regular people that are like standoffish of anything that Joe Biden's going to do. It'll just make them acquiesce. They'll just take it. Kind of like they did with Trump.
And explain really quickly for those that aren't quite sure on the CBDC, this central bank digital currency. What might that look like? What is that? Because there's people, I understand, listening to the show that are very familiar with Bitcoin and crypto. But for those that are just kind of, it's a gray area and they're thinking, well, is the digital currency, are they going to take Bitcoin over? Or what might this look like? And what's the best way to explain to someone who's kind of curious but doesn't understand it?
Sure, I'll do my best. It's going to be a system. They won't build it off the backbone of anything else other than blockchain technology itself. They'll use the blockchain, and I think that's their white papers that they've already done. But let me tell you why this is if anything that I can talk about that you pay attention to those central bank digital currencies, the CBDCs. It is poison. It is cancer. It is, I believe, if it's implemented the way they want it implemented, then you can no longer have a functioning system of any sort of equilibrium in politics. It's over, because you'll have something like the Canadian government was able to seize bank accounts and even go after some of the Bitcoin exchanges. But when you have a top-down system of central bank digital currency where you have your own wallet, it identifies as you, it knows how much currency is in the system at any time. It can expand and contract the system at will, which means that, well, like right now for cash, right? A lot of people don't know that 80% of all the $100 bills ever made, they're not even in this country. They're outside this country. So 80% are just outside. 65% of all paper currency is outside the U.S. It's outside of CONUS. So you talk about a reset where the central bank can now, in real time, expand or contract, right? And they can also make your dollars expire. They can make it to where you can't accept payment. They can make it to where you can only spend it on certain things. And if you think that they won't, I mean, literally, we just went through this PSYOP where, 6 feet apart and, and then you have people they just lie to you, about, oh, it's safe and effective. They do all this stuff and they're going to, you got Deborah Birx, like the scarf lady. She's like, oh, we knew it wouldn't work, but we did it anyway. We just, and that's what you'll hear. It's not going to ever invade your privacy. It won't ever expire if you believe in Jesus or something. Yes, it will. And for you to trust that, for anyone to even want it in any way, what I just say about, we got Bitcoin, we got crypto that's decentralized, we have gold and silver standards. I don't need you. You want to tax me? Fine. Send me the bill. I'll pay you in Bitcoin. I'll go get a cashier's check from a bank that deals in, some kind of stable currency. I don't know. Just anything but you guys devaluing it. But see, they need it for the empire. And this is where we'll go round and round, because you and I know that we don't need them for that. But they're going to keep pushing all you do. And people are going to go download those wallets. And I don't know, that may be the end of, like, I don't know how I'll be in business. I mean, I'm in the gold and silver business. I'm sure, they hate us. So they, and I have to pay I pay taxes. I do all this stuff. I'm an open book. But at some level, when they say, well, here's a veteran that doesn't like wars, so we need to get rid of this guy. I don't know. They can do whatever they want. It's to get the central bank digital currency. It's not here yet, but they're working around the clock to make it happen. And one of the excuses is, well, China's got one. We have to compete. What kind of argument is that? They have slave camps too, and or mobile organ harvesting vans. I mean, you compete with them on that. What is wrong with you? That's not a real thing. But Republicans are going to, this is like we've got to compete. The Chinese have a gap, the central currency. So I don't know if anybody's paying attention to that is poison of the highest order. And it's not about finances. It's about controlling you.
Are you optimistic about anything, let's say in the next 5 to 10 years? I mean, you can control what you can control. And I assume, knowing what I do about you, that you're probably optimistic about the homestead and some of the stuff, the projects that you're doing. Outwardly, aside from that, are you optimistic at all?
Yes. Because ultimately, if you have faith, because I believe in God and I fear God, because I don't want to... I just want to be a good servant. And I don't think I would have said that exact same thing 5 years ago. But I think,
me too.
How do you not have a spiritual look at all this when you just see evil? I mean, yeah, we all have our faults, and I'm not a preacher. I don't claim to be or have any sort of knowledge. I just know that the planners, whatever you want to call them, they can plan all they want. And they can have their sophisticated AI. They're just a bunch of psychopaths with monopoly money. That doesn't make them special. It doesn't make them smart. They have a vision. They want to live forever and be transhumanists and have their consciousness uploaded into a computer. I don't know about you, but I don't want to live forever. I'm sorry. I want to have a good life. I want to die on empty, where I've done a bunch of projects and people could rely on me. And I achieve what the Greeks called arete, which is just excellence. Just want to be excellent at something and what I do. But then you have your time and it expires and you move on to another realm, whatever it is. We don't know. But I do believe that the consciousness is being raised right now. I think they went too far, too fast. I know that they want war. They may get it. Or cooler heads could prevail. Maybe somebody on the other side says, I know what you guys are doing, and they just don't take the bait. I don't know. Of course, there's false flags. There's all kinds of stuff that could happen. But I do think people, and not everybody, but it could just be enough. They just say, we're not going into the dark night. We're not going into your hive, your Klaus Schwabian nightmare. We're not doing this. We're not going to eat bugs for Greta. We're going to have communities. We're going to be Americans or free people or human beings. That's my hope. And I do think that is very possible. So I'm optimistic that that's real possible. Unfortunately, the human condition doesn't learn they only learns through pain.
Right.
Really. And that's on a personal level. You take stuff for granted until you start hurting. It's like, oh, well, then I need to change my behavior. So right now it's kind of floating along. You can still get cheap food through the drive-through, still travel or do. I mean, it's not bad yet, but they're doing a controlled demolition of our society. So eventually, it will be bad, and so I think it'll be bad enough for people to wake up.
I think so too. I was telling someone yesterday, there's not a lot of wokesters in a bread line. Kind of like atheists in a foxhole.
That's right.
We only have woke stuff, people believing this craziness because we're so spoiled. And I think it's just a good time to create weak men kind of phenomenon.
Yes, they do. And then you're exactly right. And it's all that stuff will go by the wayside.
Yeah.
And there's food shortages and economic downturn, and people, it'll sober them up. It's like, how am I going to go protest non-binary, blah, blah, blah. It's just, and that's such a psyop, it's clearly just cultural Marxism being pushed by the world's richest people. And it's ironic because the people that are protesting think that the world's richest people are their enemy, and that's who funds it. And it's like a snake eating itself, and it's so insane. But it's an insane time to be alive in general.
Yeah, and the trans thing also is just another form of big pharma pushing forever money coming into their pockets, but just like they did over the last several years. And again, like you mentioned, especially when you come from backgrounds like ours from the 90s, these are the people that I thought for a long time told me, oh, I hate big pharma, I hate big corporations, and they're playing right into the game. And now it's I saw more leftists putting a Pfizer thing on their profile than ever before. I could, and it's just, it's an inverted world that we're in right now.
It really is. It just truly is insane. And you're just watching, when we can all kind of sense that Western civilization is collapsing. Like we can just see it, like in real time, like the cultures, like where's the good music? Where's the art? It's just all just down, and again, I think that would have happened eventually, but we're just been accelerated. Like they figured out what to push, who to put where, and they made it happen. And like you go out in places, I've been in Branson, Missouri, you can go out to, I went and got some tacos at a food truck, and there's people just hanging out, just living life. It's America, Nobody's doing any politics. Nobody's doing any protests. It's just, small town stuff. There's still that everywhere, but what we see, on the TV and what we see, on the news, you see a culture melting down. That is true, but there's two things going on at the same time. You see culture melting down in a lot of places, but in other places it's just fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why I moved out of Austin and into a small town of Lockhart, because same thing. You can go to the bar. I don't know whose politics or what. People buy you shots and you just talk like normal people. It's right. Weird. It's good. Go ahead and plug anything. You got all kinds of stuff to plug, so plug away now. Anything you'd like.
I do. I have too many things to plug. Well, first of all, my website is arterburn.news. Arterburn.news, my last name.news, and you can find all my podcasts there. You can contact me through there. I have a podcast called Paratruther. That's connected to Arterburn. So if you go look for Paratruther, you'll find Arterburn too. It's the same stuff. I do a live radio show at least once a week. And then I do a couple of podcasts every 10 days or so. We just did one on the Denver airport. I'm just digging up old stuff and redoing stuff with some researcher friend of mine and just having a good time. And then I do a show called America Unplugged. If you're familiar with like the McLaughlin group back in the late 80s, early 90s, or going back, they actually went into the 2000s. Pat Buchanan and John McLaughlin and all those guys. We do kind of like that if everybody had a tinfoil hat, right? And that's we're Donald Jeffries, who wrote Hidden History, is on the panel, and Billy Ray Valentine, who's host of the Infant Fringe podcast, and myself. And we just take the news of the week. We'll take the top headlines and then just go around table and discuss each with an individual, our own unique point of view. I do a show on gold and silver and cryptocurrencies called the Wise Wolf Gold and Crypto Show. No new episodes in the last 3 weeks. We've been putting together a new program, which I'm really excited about, called Wolfpack. It's called wolfpack.gold, and it's a membership program, because I was noticing I'm getting so many buy-ins of people walking in and selling me stuff, and I'm thinking, if people were members here, then I could give them a great product at a great price on an automatic shipping thing, and it would be unique, and you get access to, I'm going to have back office that only they can see, and shopping cart, and we got 4 different tiers. It starts at a Lone Wolf package, and it goes all the way to the Wise Wolf package, and that's like $500. But you can go to do a custom one as well. So that's my plugs. I'll stop there. I could do more, but we'll end it there. It'll turn into an infomercial.
Yeah, no worries. I'll link to all of these in the show notes page for this episode. Tony Arterburn Radio Transmission, man. Thank you so much for being on here.
I just so appreciate being asked on. Anytime you want me on, and we'll have to have you over on the transmission as well.
I'd love to do it. Thank you, sir. I told you guys were going to like that man, Tony Arterburn. I think he's got a lot of new fans because of this show and new listeners to the Arterburn Radio Transmission. I can tell you guys he was genuine. He was the same way off air as he was on. Really cool guy. I'm glad we got to hook up, and I think there'll be more of this. As for this show, you already know, counterflowpodcast.com. Subscribe to our YouTube page. Let's get those YouTube numbers up. Search Counterflow with Buck Johnson on YouTube, and then smash, as they say, the subscribe button. All right, just do that. We got the Telegram group. You can search for us, find us. Follow me on Twitter at BuckRebel, BuckRebel. And until next week, which, by the way, speaking of next week, let's talk about last week really quick. The feedback I got on my show with Rachel Wilson was among the most positive and voluminous feedback I've received on a show in a long time. So I'm glad you guys liked that. I thought she was great as well. And as I was saying, until next week, y'all have a good one. See ya.
You get split in fucking half, but I on the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid, and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Like the sound of the Counterflow podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.